Perfect. So let's go ahead and get this started. If Rep Davis is able to join us, then he is. If he is not, he is not. If he does not end up joining us, we'll just try and get a separate interview with him to broadcast out to everybody later. Unfortunately, having so many candidates with so many busy schedules, it can be very hard to get you all in the same room. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Jenna Henry. I am the secretary for the Keystone Progress Education Fund. I am very excited to be co-moderating this panel here today with Carmina Taylor, who is also a board member of the Keystone Progress Education Fund. Since Rep Davis is not here, do you want to go ahead and just start with just take it from the top like we planned instead of moving things around?
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Brian, thank you. Representative Sims, thank you, Mr. Sosa, for being here. We wanted to avoid just having a regular 3-minute introduction about yourselves and really focus on open up with an emotional intelligence question. And so I just want to say in the snapshot that emotional intelligence is understanding one's abilities, emotions to someone else's. And there's 5 competencies related to emotional intelligence. One of it is self-awareness, motivating oneself, managing emotions, empathy, and social skills. So I'm going to ask each of you a question that relates to some of those competencies, and then just answer it just in a normal way. So we'll start with Ray, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Ray, tell us about a mistake you made one time in your life, any kind of situation, and how did you handle that mistake?
So my first emergency management task force back in 1996, I made logistical mistakes that cost the office, some funds and some resources. So I did learn from that, and it's very, very important that you recognize your strengths and your weaknesses, and you apply in the years to come as best practices to follow. So same thing with my business, and same thing with my private sector career. It's very important that you learn from your mistakes and you recognize them as what they are, and you apply best practices. So yes, I have made mistakes before.
Okay, great. Representative Sims, tell us about a time when your mood altered your performance. It can be a positive situation or hopefully not a negative, but when did your mood alter your performance in a positive way, period?
I'm going to give you a positive way. Again, Carmina, just so I can check in tech-wise. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, just speak up a little bit louder, or Jenna, put the phone closest to your thing. That's what I did this morning.
I'm happy to be a little bit louder.
That's perfect.
The answer is, so in my very first term in office, I believe in July of my first term in office 10 years ago, the Supreme Court passed marriage equality. I'm a civil rights attorney by trade. I had been an instructor and a fellow at the Center for Progressive Leadership for years before I ran for office. And as a progressive civil rights attorney, it was among the largest civil rights decisions ever handed down about my life and the life of a lot of my clients during my professional career. And it happened during my freshman term in office. At the time, I got asked whether or not I was going to speak on the bill, or speak on the Supreme Court's decision. And there's a way on the House of Representatives where members can speak, usually at the end of the day, on an issue that is not germane to any bill that day. And my colleagues do it all the time. They get up and they point out that the Kiwanis Club is there from their district, or they've got the winning softball team, or their spouse is there. I had decided to get up to acknowledge the Supreme Court decision on marriage equality. And I had let the Republican Speaker of the House know that I was going to do it. And as I spoke and started to commemorate the decision, my mic was cut. And I didn't know what was happening. I frankly, I thought that I had done. I thought I broke it. They're old microphones. There's a video of me kind of messing with it. And ultimately what had happened is my Republican colleagues had objected to me speaking on the floor, and the Speaker of the House had cut my mic. And what played out was this massive debate in front of me my freshman year between leadership, between the progressive and the moderate parts of the Democratic caucus, between the Republicans. And what followed for me was a couple of days where more of my Republican colleagues came to talk to me about non-discrimination, talk to me about equality, for having watched it play out on the House floor than had spoken to me in the 6 months that I had been a legislator. And it allowed me to come back on the floor with a degree of strength. I mean, I was scared to be back on the floor to have to address it, no question. But the mood that came from my Republican colleagues seeing discrimination play out directly on the House floor. And, a lot of them were wrong. They used the wrong words when interacting with me, but their sentiment was right. And it really did bolster. It gave me a sense of confidence that I didn't have in that moment to respond and to push back.
Excellent. Thank you both. Jenna?
Yeah, that's really great. And I love that opening. I think it really helps you get to know a person a little bit better.
Humanizes it.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know exactly what is the lieutenant governor's office, right? So the lieutenant governor, essentially the main thing of the lieutenant governor's office is that they have to be ready to replace the governor. They're the first in line of succession to the governor. If something were to happen to the governor, the lieutenant governor has to be ready to take over the governor's duties, right? So that's number one. The other duties of the lieutenant governor's office are presiding over the Pennsylvania Senate and the presiding over the Board of Pardons. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Board of Pardons. For me in particular, this is an area of specific interest to me. I was arrested for a felony and charged with a felony and convicted of a felony for selling an eighth of pot whenever I was 20 years old. We had a really bad district attorney. She refused to come off a felony unless I went to jail. I was young and terrified. So I took the felony. I later got involved in politics by volunteering on the campaign of the opponent of said district attorney. And we won in a landslide. And that was before that, I was just a chef. I thought I that was what I could be. So really volunteering on that campaign and, helping to get rid of that awful district attorney kind of opened me up to this whole world of politics. And now here I am, all these years later, moderating this debate. So the Board of Pardons is, I have a pardon application in right now. So this is obviously something that's very, very personal to me. And I want to give Carmina a chance to give her perspective here a little bit too, before we get into questions.
So a year and a half ago, or right after the peaceful protest in Philadelphia, I started to get involved with other community leaders across the state that had racial injustices. And as a Black woman from the Southeast, I got in my car and I drove all around rural Pennsylvania. And it was a moment, the fall of 2020. Yes, again, the fall of 2020, or the fall of that year, I sat in a barbershop in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and I was there for 12 hours. And I heard all these stories from these Black men, old, young, indifferent. But it was these high school students that really took me. And one of the guys had just graduated. One was still in high school. And the guy who graduated, he said, I'm one of the lucky ones. I graduated without being in jail. And I said, what? Like in jail at high school before you graduate? And what happened is, as I started to dissect what was going on in Johnstown, I found out about so many people being incarcerated, right? So the county prison system, or I should say the county in Cambria, there's only 3% Black, but Blacks make up 90% of the people incarcerated. And so I reached out to Brandon Flood, at the time, the Secretary of Board of Pardons, and I said, Brandon, we've got to do something. And what we ended up doing is going to the outskirts of Pittsburgh and Philadelphia for a year, to barbershops across the state, to meet people where they were, to offer them an opportunity to take advantage of how they reformed the process to get pardoned. And so we started a tour called Put Your Pardon in the Pipeline, and it was very successful. 6, 7, 8 months into it, I learned how different communities have different reasons why there's a recidivism rate and why there's an incarceration rate, period. And so I had proposed to the Black Caucus to have a real talk barbershop conversation about the Office of the Board of Pardons. And our questions are going to relate to that in my mind. And I want my perspective because I want to share my perspective because I don't have a jailhouse story. I don't have anyone in my family that's been incarcerated. I don't have anyone that I know that's been incarcerated. And yet I was touched. Yet I was transformed. Yet I had questions. And so my answer was to have this pardon pipeline tour to offer solutions. But what I realized is that the Office of the Board of Pardons needs more funding to be more efficient and help more Pennsylvanians. And the office needs to be able to it's in the close of modernizing process, but we need to be able to expand the number of people on the Board of Pardons too. So Jenna and I are coming from two perspectives, and I think it's really important because we need to talk about what you envision for your role moving forward. So she's off the call, so I'm going to ask the first question, right? What is your vision to continue to reform the Board of Pardons? Now, Mr. Sosa, I started with you first. Brian, if you don't mind. Wait, talk. Let's see if she can still hear you. Can you hear? Oh, no, because Jenna's gone. Listen, really quick, Brian.
Hold on, I'm trying to log back in. I don't know how I got kicked out. I'm clicking share audio and video, and it's not letting me.
You're in there, sweetie. You're in there. Can you hear me? Jenna, can you hear me?
We hear you fine, Jenna. We hear you fine. You're doing great.
But can she hear us?
Okay, if you can.
There's two of you.
Okay, I'm not seeing my own video.
Okay, Brian, Jenna, can you hear me?
We can see you. We can see you. You're good.
Okay, cool. As long as you can hear.
All right, Brian, as a backup, take my phone number really quickly, and whoever was calling, call back. So my number is 215-284-5680. If someone wants to call that number, I can put you on until Jenna gets on. Shake your head, Brian. You're going to have somebody call me? I can't hear you. See, Jenna had you on whatever phone you were calling. She had you on her laptop. So the same person that you called, if you could call on your iPad, my number, let's see if I can get you in. Do you want my number again?
I got it. I'm back. Okay. Can you hear Brian now?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Speak up one more time, Brian.
Roger, Victor.
Yep.
Wait.
So, Jenna, I just went right into the question about asking what they envision into continuing to reform the Board of Pardons. Is that okay, Jenna? All right, Brian, could you please answer? Representative Sims, and then Mr. Sosa after that.
Yeah, and Carmina, I'm going to kind of build upon one of the things that you spoke about when you were talking about the Board of Pardons, and that is that one of the factual truisms that we know about pardons is that when more people know about the process, more people apply for the process and more people are accepted. And it sounds almost fun. And Ray and I have had this conversation before in other forums. We've talked a lot about this. This isn't rocket science with respect to the Board of Pardons. This is resource science with respect to the Board of Pardons. The more resources that the Board of Pardons has, the more people will apply, the more applications are reviewed, they're more reviewed in a timely manner, the more they're successful. That creates a ripple effect in a community of understanding that the Board of Pardons can be trusted, can be utilized, can be successful. We need a culture of acceptance of the Board of Pardons application and process system. And it's something that we've seen from the current Lieutenant Governor, that really is a top-down approach to expanding whether or not people know what the Board of Pardons is, know how to apply, know that they can trust the system, know that they will see victims advocates there, but they will also see advocates for the incarcerated, know that they will see people there that not only can speak to their experiences, but they'll have the opportunity to speak to their own experiences. The Board of Pardons, as far as I'm concerned, the Board of Pardons has never had a civil rights attorney to chair the Board of Pardons. It is something that, as Jenna did, this is something that I lead with when I speak about the various roles of the Lieutenant Governor. Because in this day and age, in this moment, I cannot think of anything that is singularly more important than getting people to understand that there is a way that we have to begin to undo some of the intense racism and classism of our criminal justice system. I'm a civil rights attorney. My entire career has been spent battling the racism and classism of our criminal justice system. Being the chair of the Board of Pardons is an opportunity of I'll call it in the classical government sense of resource allocation, to be able to put the power in hands of people to know that this is a system that can be trusted and that can be utilized. And when it's utilized, it's successful. It's not rocket science. It's data-driven approach to understanding what works.
Mr. Sosa?
So I have been appointed by 3 governors already, and one of my expertise areas is juvenile prison systems. And I know that you could turn a child into a really bad person in a matter of months with the wrong approach. Unfortunately, in Pennsylvania, as opposed to different states, and I've worked in 7 states through different task forces having to do with this, we have a very punitive approach. It's not rehabilitative. So we deal with our approach as far as we have a lot of vendors that depend on us keeping people arrested or in prison. So one of the things that we need is resources. Second, and I discussed it with Brian, silly things like what Jenna went through shouldn't be taxing our resources at all, that are limited already. So smaller offenses shouldn't be an issue for us to tax our system. So they should be pardoned. When it comes to our resources, we need to increase those. We have a recidivism of 70% right now. And that means that we've been treating this as a money-making machine. So we have to definitely modernize our approach. We're 40 years behind from everybody else. So when it comes to that, and when it comes to your grassroots approach, that's the best approach to have to make sure that people get the resources that they need and that they understand the system. So in my particular vision, it's all about making sure that our juveniles are treated fairly, that we don't turn good kids into bad people, and we don't incarcerate people for minor offenses. You could turn a really good person into a bad person in a matter of months. So that relates to what we're doing right now, and we can our punitive approach right now in Pennsylvania not only sit behind from every state that surrounds us, but it is non-sustainable. You cannot have that amount of recidivism and turning people into bad people and treating this as a business and be successful as a state. So it all comes down to resources, and it all comes down to treating the offenses to the level that they are, not taxing our resources that are limited already to the smaller offenses.
Jenna, may I just ask a follow-up question before your next one?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I know for a fact that before Brandon resigned, his office had 4 employees and less than $1 million budget, Brian. Mr. Sims or Representative Sims. I would really like to know from both of you, if you're Lieutenant Governor, how would you strategically approach the budget process to increase staffing and money, staffing to yield more money for the office to operate and give them more resources to operate. And the reason why I'm saying that is when I went to other places around the state and got people in the pardoning process, I specifically told them to pay attention to who was running for lieutenant governor the next time, so you can ask the lieutenant governor questions about your story, because that's who you need to vote for when you hear the person, the way they answer. And that was a way that I told them, because they didn't think they could vote, that you could vote even though you paid your sentence, right? So I want to talk about that. That's very important, because we could talk about resources, but the strategy is, how are you going to work during that budget cycle to promote an effort to increase staffing and other operational expenses? I started first with Brian. So Mr. Sosa, could you answer that? And then Brian, and then I'm sorry, Jenna, then we've got time. I just thought that budget was really important.
I agree.
Budget strategy.
What I've seen in other lieutenant governor offices in other states, and what I've seen as best practices, is appropriation, just like we're doing with the public higher public education system. That's the first. Second, the budget that you mentioned is offensive. Just a decade ago, the state that had the lesser funds to tackle all the paperwork that they do have, and all the employment personnel, had $17 million at their disposal, and that was about 7 years back. So we're way behind, and till we can do a permanent line of funding for this, I think appropriations will be the best alternative for that, and of course taxing our natural resources appropriately. We are giving a lot of money for free, and I know that Representative Sims agrees with a lot of that when it comes to the taxation of natural resources. So I think we're leaving a lot of money on the table, and we can't keep plowing money without closing the gaps that we have, and those are things like approaching our Pardons and Parole Board with a focus on rehabilitation and concentrating on what's important, not punitive, and not keeping people in jail because it's good business.
Representative Sims, your budget strategy.
Yeah, and Carmina, I'm going to stress it enough. You can call me Brian. My parents are colonels in the Army. You can call me Brian. And I've served for the last decade in the minority party. Brian's the nicest thing I've been called in a little while. And so the answer is multifold, and here's why. So if elected, I will be the lieutenant governor that has the most experience with the budget process, our actual state's actual budget process, in nearly 20 years. And now that's both good and bad, because the answer here isn't just simply better advocacy gets better dollars, because we have both Democrats and Republicans standing in the way of better funding. Let's be clear, we tax a lot of people in this state a lot of money. We tax people so much money that the federal government gave us back $7 billion of our own money to use in response to COVID, and our Republican leaders put $6 billion of that in a rainy day fund that's never had more than about $260 million in it. Yes, it's raining. So we can talk about how can we double or triple it. There's a couple of answers. One, it's being willing to push back against Democrats in leadership as hard as we're willing to push back against Republicans in leadership. We have a Democratic governor right now. We know what it looks like to have to push back against the moderate part of our party. We know what it looks like that, there are so few of us that are actually progressive in our legislature, that having a progressive approach to how we fund the Board of Pardons, should it be $2 million? Should it be $3.5 million? The quick answer is we don't know. We actually don't know. There's not been studies in Pennsylvania about where is that fulcrum point between the appropriate amount of funding that gives us the actual appropriate outcome that we want. And that is every single person who can qualify, applying, and being accepted. But the answer is both advocacy during the budget with respect to Republicans that control the House and Senate, and they do, and advocacy with respect to a governor who I'm hoping is going to be our next Democratic governor, and making sure that this isn't just one of those things where Democrats and Republicans agree that in order to be, tough on crime, we're not going to be soft on pardons. Because I think that's a lot of what the ideology is right now. I think we would be fooling ourselves to tell ourselves that the $1 million budget that we have right now with the Board of Pardons is simply a result of Republicans forcing us to accept that and that alone. This has not been a budgeting priority of the Democratic Party or the Democratic caucus in the 10 years that I've been in the House, and that needs to be said.
Ms. Jenna, so I don't take over too much. I love it. Thank you both.
Yeah, no, both really great. I am truthfully fully undecided in this race. I don't think you all are making it any easier for me to choose here today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about awareness around the Board of Pardons. As somebody, who is formerly incarcerated and, comes from a background of poverty, most people who have criminal records don't realize that a pardon is ever even an option. I didn't know that getting a pardon was an option until about 2017, 2018. I had no idea. I thought I was just stuck with a felony for the rest of my life. And then, when with, the current lieutenant governor kind of made it a lot easier for people with marijuana charges, which was great. So I do have a pardon app in now. But how can we expand awareness about the Board of Pardons, and what are your ideas and plans for making sure that the office is getting out into the communities most affected and making sure that people know that getting a pardon is an option?
I think Ray would have to start first and then Brian.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wasn't sure what order we were in.
No, Brian. Brian starts first and then Ray. I apologize. I'm so engrossed.
There's a couple of different ways of going about this. The first thing you're simply identifying, first of all, is that in a state that wrote the rules of representative democracy, for us to not actually teach civics at any level of public education in a really reliable way is part of the reason people just don't know about the mechanisms of government. It's part of the reason a guy like me ran in a state legislature. My parents were Army. I didn't have a dad that was a council person or a mom that was a committee person or something. The whole mechanism of government is something I had to teach myself as a civil rights attorney in order to access it. And that's a kind of what we do for everybody. We essentially say, if you want to know about the mechanisms of government, you're on your own. Good luck. Find the spare time, find the spare privilege, find the spare dollars to teach yourself about this government that is supposed to be serving you. And so right from the get-go, you're identifying just a big old gap in the sort of what I'll call sort of resource allocation of privilege in our public education system. But way beyond that, there's a couple of different things a lieutenant governor can do. I'm going to use our past couple of lieutenant governors as examples because despite the jobs that we've identified the lieutenant governor does as the chair of the Board of Pardons, as president of the Senate, they also serve as the chair of the Emergency Management Council in Pennsylvania. But their leadership is far beyond that. Their leadership is intended to be statewide leadership. It's intended to be 67 county-wide leadership. They are intended to both lift up the voice of our governor in the Democratic Party, but also to challenge the governor and to challenge the Democratic Party. I think what the lieutenant governor can do with respect to Jenna, with respect to your question specifically, is one, and as you pointed out, we had a lieutenant governor using the mechanism of marijuana arrest that shined a huge spotlight, used the resources of one of the most visible offices in the state to shine a huge spotlight on this mechanism most people didn't know about. I promise you there were a lot of people that didn't have marijuana arrest that were learning about the system because he was talking about marijuana arrest. The other side of it is the more formal side, and it's the side that we should all be talking about. It might be nice that there could be a lieutenant governor that believes deeply in the pardons process, but the next one might not, and the one after that might, and then the next one might not. What we need in place is a structural system in the Board of Pardons, both a marketing system and a management system for that marketing that is making sure that people are actually being taught what the Board of Pardons does at the time that they're from the moment they're involved with our incarceration system. They should know about the Board of Pardons system. Of the things, these are the kinds of things that people like Representative Jordan Harris has been working on for the entire decade that we've served in the House, is making sure that when someone has served their time, we don't open up the door, kick them out on the street and say, good effing luck. That we hand them out, we give them the resources, that we teach them how we want them to re-engage with us. We built these systems to allow people to re-engage, to allow people to be lifted of a burden that's going to impact their employment or their credit or their housing. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And so what we need, and we've talked about this with respect to Carmina's question regarding the budget, is that a budget that tells a couple of people about the pardon process isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. I'll also quote, there was a friend of mine named Adrian Rivera Reyes who ran for city council in Philadelphia years ago, a Latinx scientist. And he used to say, don't pretend to give a voice to the voiceless, give them a microphone. The best people to be teaching people about this process are people that have engaged in the process. It's part of the reason that we all like Brandon Flood so much in this job, is that he wasn't talking at people, he was talking with people. And that's the way that this job needs to be done.
Excellent. Mr. Sosa?
So I come from two generations of people that have been recognized at a national level for commutations and for criminal justice reform. And I could say names for reference, but the important part is that we need to, and I've seen this, my experience is only in the executive branch of government dealing with this particular issue since 1995. So I don't have to create the wheel. I know what works. So when it comes to that, we educate the people while they're inside, because it's the demographic that we're targeting. Taking this to public schools or taking this to unaffected communities is not going to be effective. You have to, part of my platform for the lieutenant governor position is to offer meritorious commutations for people that deserve it, but we educate them. They come out with knowledge so they can reintegrate into society, and they come out with a platform that we provide for reintegration, for mental health, for jobs. So part of that education while they're inside is knowing their rights and what they can and cannot solicit. Since I've been dealing with Pennsylvania, since my first task force with Governor Rich, we haven't even tried to educate our prison population in the rights that they have, and they do have rights. That's how we're going to lower our recidivism, because the commutations that we've had in the past are just tossing them on the street and not allowing them to know what they should be doing, and that's our fault. So we need to change that with somebody that actually has done it before. And my approach would be simply educate the people while they're serving, so they know their rights and they know what they can solicit. And of course, provide them with the resources, which they have no knowledge of now as we speak. So this is why we have advocates like what we have in my family, teaching them, but that's on a case-by-case basis. And it's a pity. We should make it as an institutional set thing that the next lieutenant governor can build on.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to switch gears here just a little bit. We're going to talk about the leadership role over the PA Senate. And I kind of wanted to put something about this on here because of the Republican attacks on the Constitution. There's actually a constitutional amendment being floated around to abolish the office of lieutenant governor. So could you each talk a little bit about, why that is? Why is it so dangerous that the Republican majority is trying to abolish the lieutenant governor's office, and how that relates to the lieutenant governor presiding over the Senate? And wait, who was first? Ray's first this time.
Every single lieutenant governor that I've worked with has been a tangible and visible partner to the governor. In Pennsylvania, we keep having this situation where people that do not meet the position keep getting elected and keeps the position as a narrative of that the position doesn't matter. And it's ignorance because the position has been abused. As an example, I remember I've been here for 12 years. I remember on my last cycle, well, the biggest thing was the lieutenant governor's home and why the position should be eliminated and the host should be eliminated. Folks, that's ignorance. The lieutenant governor was given a home to be next to the National Guard outpost. Why? Because as a chair for the Emergency Management Commission, you can't have a commute. You have to be right next to the biggest tool that you have to treat the next natural disaster or the next man-made disaster. So it's just ignorance. So people see it as a position that doesn't matter when it's vital to us. We could change the life of Pennsylvanians by reversing our recidivism. We could, when the governor declares a natural disaster, and we've been blessed that we have a serious one. I've been in 11 task forces, and I can tell you the lieutenant governor's performance is the performance of the state in emergency management. If you don't know what you're doing, you have to Google the information, we're going to perish. We have infrastructure that is crumbling as we speak. We in no way are prepared to withstand a national disaster. Every single big city that we have has crumbling bridges. The day President Biden came in, there was a bridge crumbling in his own route. So that tells us that every single lieutenant governor has ignored what they're supposed to do, because the part number one of being a lieutenant governor as the emergency management chair is preparedness and mitigation. In no way we're prepared for a natural disaster. So imagine the governor declares an emergency and you have somebody in position that hasn't done one day in one task force to coordinate emergency management. All of a sudden, the governor, with all confidence, as he should, sends the duties to the lieutenant governor. What does he do? You need to be an expert in emergency coordination. I have been coordinating emergencies since 1995 in 11 task forces. I've been to Haiti twice, so I know how to coordinate emergency management at a federal level and an international level. So you have the position has been populated by people that use it as a trampoline, and that's a disservice, and that's what people see for the past decade. So we need to change that. Why? Because the position is vital for Pennsylvanians. What Representative Sims was alluding to is the local government advisory committee. They haven't met it over 10 years, and that's how you put your resources per county. That's a sin. And we keep doing it on these crazy cycles when we keep electing friends of friends. And that cannot be done because we are 50 years behind every single state that surrounds us. So the knowledge from all of this is we need the experience from people that have done the job before and make this a visible, tangible partner for the governor that has the executive management experience, to bring forward on day one. So that's my position on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Jenna, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. I'm going to try to answer them in order. First, why? Why are Republicans leading an effort to try to eliminate the electability of the lieutenant governor's office? Because they are a party that supports racism and sexism and xenophobia and transphobia and homophobia. Let's be very clear. I call nobody anything, but I will acknowledge that those words have definition. That the policies that you are supporting rise to the level of those definitions. Those policies are those things. Republicans have, during my entire career and during most of our lifetimes, tried dramatically to gerrymander Pennsylvania. We are the last great gerrymandered state in this country. And a party that has tried for my entire decade in the House to suppress the vote, to gerrymander the vote, to rob people of the vote, doesn't want a Latino man or a gay man running for lieutenant governor. It doesn't want people like us in leadership. It doesn't want people like us to have the capacity to even attain leadership. all of us on this call are used to having people say, it is not your time now. And that's what the Republican Party wants, in part because it knows that if the Republican Party or the parties get to select who the lieutenant governor is, that lieutenant governor is statistically more likely to be a cis, straight, white man than anything else in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, even though there are so many of us that are not a cis, straight, white man. The party that has been trying to suppress the vote does so because they know if in the state that wrote the rules of representative democracy, if there was authentic representative democracy, we would have equal pay, we would have comprehensive sex education, we would have criminal justice reform, we would have police reform, we would be protecting and respecting our environment, we would be governing differently. And so what you do is you try to pass mechanisms that keep people like us from positions of power to influence policy progressively. And one of the best ways of doing that is robbing people of their ability to vote, robbing people of their right to make a choice. You know, this bill did come up, as Jenna pointed out, 100% of my Democratic colleagues voted against that bill in the House of Representatives. 100% of my Democratic colleagues said the candidate for governor shouldn't be choosing the lieutenant governor, and the party shouldn't be choosing the lieutenant governor. The people should choose the lieutenant governor. And why? Among the many reasons, aside from just we are a representative democracy, the people get to decide who our representatives are. There's not a ticket until after the primary when the people decide who their candidate for governor, who their candidate for lieutenant governor is. But also it's because our lieutenant governor is a very unique position nationally in government. Some lieutenant governors are shadows of the governor. They're sort of a vice version of the governor. They stand in for the governor on speeches when the governor can't be there. They are a representative of the governor in places physically when the governor isn't able to be there. That's not the case in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, our lieutenant governor does three, as we've all pointed out, very specific jobs that are often performed by three different people in other states. We were a state that put them all under one position and wanted that position to have the power and the gravity of government because it was so critically important. And if it was going to be that critically important, as Ray pointed out, then the people needed to decide, not a political party, not a single individual, not a single candidate. And the people that want to rob us of that decision do so again because they know that people like all of us on this call have the opportunity to potentially succeed, and all of us would make history in serving in this position. And that's not, while that's interesting for our families and it's interesting for the many communities we come from, it should be disappointing to everybody on this call. Everybody watching this should recognize why it is so problematic that people like all of us on this call have been excluded from these types of positions up until now. And I think we all agree that our government isn't working the way it's supposed to. It's not responding the way it's supposed to. It doesn't see us and respect us and protect us and recognize us. And why would it? It hasn't included us.
So thank you for that. I'm just going to go brass knuckles in the sense that I'm a strong Black woman. It very much frazzles me. Okay. I remember very clearly January 2021 when they were swearing in the new representatives, right? And you remember the atrocity of what the Republican leadership did to the lieutenant governor at that moment. And I was floored. And I'm thinking that, you know, I'm being positive that we could shift the House to have more Democratic seats, right? But I want to ask both of you, let's look at this high probability of having another House and Senate Republican majority, and neither one of you have been elected lieutenant governor. You know what happened in January 2021. I want to know what you're going to prepare for in January 2023 for any kind of mess that occurred last time. Ray, I believe, is it his turn?
No, it's Brian's turn.
It's Brian's turn? Okay.
Yeah.
So Brian, please answer for me as a strong Black woman. I want my lieutenant governor to be tough. I want my lieutenant governor to be prepared. I want my lieutenant governor to have an A, B, and C plan for the foolishness that happens in the assembly, because I work with young people and I'm trying to get them to understand the importance of civics and citizenship and what our General Assembly should look like. And now you have that responsibility, Mr. Sims. What are you going to do so there's not a debacle when everything happens in January 2023? And the same question for you, Mr. Sosa. Is that a fair question?
That is.
fairest of questions. And it's what everybody in the audience is wondering right now, because we're all wondering. Frankly, it's the reason many of us have run. It is hands down the reason I ran. You said you wanted somebody that's got toughness and experience. We'll get to my toughness in a minute, but experience is an easy one for me to speak about. I am the single most experienced person running for this position with respect to the actual rules of our Senate by nearly threefold. There is nobody else running this. And frankly, there hasn't been somebody who has run for this position in a couple of cycles that have as much experience with the rules of the House and the rules of the Senate as I structurally, functionally do. I'm proud of that. I'm bothered by it. It's been annoying as hell having to gain this level of experience. But for the last decade, I have lived with and through and around the rules of the House of Representatives, not only in the minority party, but with a giant bullseye on my chest in the minority party. And that's where this gets to the toughness part of it. The simple fact of the matter is that every single Democrat that is going to talk to all of us is going to tell us that we have the worst Republicans in the country, that we have some of the most vicious, vitriolic, most awful behaving Republicans anywhere in America, that all Republicans in leadership behave more statistically like the leaders of the northern counties of Texas than anywhere else in America. And the truth is that for the last 10 years, especially in the House, I have been the person fighting back the hardest day in and day out, not just on LGBTQ rights. That's why I joined. Women's rights, reproductive rights, racial and ethnic justice, LGBTQ civil rights. Every single person watching this has seen multiple videos of me standing toe-to-toe with Republican leaders trying to deny women access to their bodies, trying to deny people like me access to a life and a future. I have fought back against our Republican leaders at every single step of the way. And oftentimes, I've either done it alone or I've done it in a very small group. When I joined the legislature, we were a progressive caucus of about 3 or 4. Now there's probably 15 or so of us that routinely, daily, stand up to these people. I'm one of the most followed legislators in America, and the reason is because every single year my Republican colleagues take massive shots at me, massive shots at people around me, and I'm the person that stands up, that gets up, that continues to show back up and fight back against these bad actors, that calls them out for who they are and for what they are. What we need right now, coming into your question, more than ever in the Senate are 2 things: discipline and experience. I'm the only candidate in this race that has been running for 14 months. I'm the only candidate in this race that has campaigned in every county in this state. I'm the only candidate in this race that raised the amount of money that I raised coming into this race. But I'm also the only candidate in this race that has actually served under the rules and in the government that we are asking this person to have leadership of. Those things matter dramatically to me right now. If I thought that we were suddenly just going to be in the leadership, in the Democrats were going to be in control of the House and Senate, my decade of experience fighting back against the worst actors in government maybe wouldn't be as important as it is right now. But you're right. We're not about to just suddenly take the Senate. What we are going to need in the front of that room is a person who has the most experience with the rules governing that room, and a person who has the most experience pushing back and fighting back against the bad actors in that room. And I'm that person in our state government, and I have been for a decade.
Mr. Sosa, and then we'll take questions from the audience.
Well, I need to say my piece on that one.
Sure. No, of course. I'm just saying after that.
Okay, perfect. So my vision for that is different. I've had the good fortune of working in different states with different lieutenant governors. I have presided, and you could be a very, very staunch supporter for your party's platform. However, that position demands that you're a statesman. That position demands that you get everybody the right to speak. Because if you go partisan, especially in that position, what happens next? The majority votes you out and you get kicked out of your own chamber. So you could be a warrior for your party, but if you're a warrior in that position, you get kicked out of your chamber that day. Your position in there is to build bridges, to break bread with people that do not like you, to make sure that in the interest of all Pennsylvanians, you build bridges so that you can get things done. You cannot be with your battle armor and go full forward, because you will not have any success. And like Representative Sims said, we have the rudest, most, incredibly incompetent Republicans in our state Senate. And with that said, you have to get along with everybody because those are your peers. And that's how you get things done. I come from a family of diplomats. I do think that the lieutenant governor position is the lieutenant governor position for everyone, not for just one party. You could be a staunch supporter of your people, and there's a lot of ways that you could get things done for your people. But in there, you have to be a diplomat. You have to be a statesman.
How excellent. Jenna, do you see that first question?
I do. Okay, so this question is from Walter. Who answers first this time? Ray?
I think it's Brian.
Okay.
It's Walter So.
I don't know why we keep messing that up, but okay.
Sorry.
We'll go to Rep Sims. This is from Walter. It says, how will you describe your relationship with Josh Shapiro, assuming you win? And he had selected Austin Davis.
Yeah, that's a very safe question. I feel like I have a really good relationship with Josh Shapiro. I mean, frankly, as evidenced by the fact that he selected me for his short list. I understand that he picked Austin Davis. This is the first time a Democrat's ever done anything like this. So it wasn't something I could really prepare for. This is something Republicans do. We elect our lieutenant governors, so I wasn't fully prepared for it, but I did make Josh Shapiro's short list for his potential choices. I've worked with him for years in the House. I've worked with him as a commissioner, worked with him as an attorney general. More importantly, and I think Ray can vouch for this as well, we're all professionals. The idea here is that we're all professionals. The people of Pennsylvania, in their great infinite wisdom, left it to the people of Pennsylvania to decide who the lieutenant governor is. And a part of that election process is trusting that they're electing people that are professionals that can work together. We're all adults. We're all professionals, and we're all in the same party. And I think the issue about whether or not we can work together is sort of a manufactured issue that only probably 1/3 of the people running for this seat think is actually a concern. And I think we need to point out that we are Democrats in Pennsylvania. We are professionals in Pennsylvania. We are running to represent 13 million people, but also, the values of the party. And I think that us getting along is important, and us being professionals is just as important.
Absolutely. Ray?
I do think I agree. I do think this is manufactured. I personally have admired Shapiro's trajectory. I'm from Montgomery County, so we all know where he started, and we've seen his rise in the state, well-deserved rise. So I do think that when it comes to this position, even though we have a lot of talent running, I'm the only one that has done the position before, appointed, not elected, and I'm the only one that would be a true partner for him. But that being said, I have to respect whatever his choice is, and I do think that I will be the one that's ready for the position to make his administration shine from day one. But that being said, I've proven since 1995 that I can work with any governor. Hopefully, it will be Governor Shapiro, and work very effectively because I've done the job before, and all that experience does help.
Yeah.
Do you see the one by James Kavanaugh? That's the last one that I see.
I see. Yeah, I there's also some from Tom Herman that I was looking at.
I can't see those. Well, can I ask James until you find the one from Tom?
Yeah, go ahead.
So James Kavanaugh asked the question, so I guess we go to Ray first. Instead of tough on crime, could you talk about better public safety?
Correct. So the lieutenant governor position has very specific rails or very specific things that you are allowed to do, but you can influence a lot when it comes to public safety. My vision has never been tough on crime. I'm not, I'm pro-law, but I think people deserve, especially people that are inside, deserve, when they deserve a second chance, it should be based on rehabilitation. So, and that influences how we put people in the community, and that influences how we grow our families and our society. When it comes to public safety, I do think that our first responders, like our cops, are completely underfunded. I think we should not defund the police. One that we should have an excess of money for the police. One of the things that made me jump into this race is because I know for a fact, because I have Masonic brothers that are cops, are cops in the state, without mentioning cities specifically, are riddled with COVID because they have to reuse protective equipment. So we have to protect our people that keep us safe. So that would be one approach that the lieutenant governor can actually influence. Keep our first responders, like our officers, safe so they can keep us safe. And I'm finding more funding. I'm finding more best practices so we can keep our citizens safer. And of course, reducing our recidivism, which by definition means that people come out, do something really, really bad so they can come back in. And we're sitting at 70% of that. And this is something that I could influence directly as the lieutenant governor.
Mr. Sims.
Carmina, I'm gonna disagree here, and I think it's important. And I think good public policy isn't shipping millions and millions and millions of tax dollars into an organization that is treating people who are having a mental health issue, people who are committing a crime, and a cat in a tree all the same. That's a mistake. We don't need to have 1950s policing into 2022. We've had 2 major summers of civil rights since then. It makes virtually no sense to me that the same organization, if I lose my car, if my indigent mother wanders off, or if there is a car accident on the highway, that we all call the exact same people and hope that they will show up and somehow discern the difference. That's ridiculous to me. Good public policy is making sure that we utilize the full breadth of our science and healthcare experts and utilize that in criminology. Not having a 21-year-old cop that's not trained in how to deal with somebody who's having a schizophrenic episode, responding to a house call where somebody might be just having a schizophrenic episode, and somebody with a mental health background and understanding would know how to de-escalate that. That's not what happened. And that's not a police officer's fault. That's our fault for pretending that one organization or one agency can be responsive to the full breadth of things that we include, not only under criminology, but also under the social safety net. For me, it's good public policy. For example, I've introduced legislation to prohibit police officers from buying or wearing tactical camouflage. What on earth does a police officer in Philadelphia have business wearing tactical camouflage other than to create fear, other than to create trauma? I have legislation that prohibits police officers, for example, from covering up their identification or their badge numbers. We saw that happening in Portland. We saw that happening the summer before last. Good public policy is about recognizing that we hear this all the time from Republicans, just throwing money at an issue isn't going to solve it. Throwing more money at policing isn't going to solve the inequities of policing. We need to parse apart what creates good public policy, what creates good criminology, what creates good responsiveness. And we need to actually be really accurate and intentional about how we do that. I want to make sure that I do believe in defunding the police. I want to fund them differently. I want to fund them, and I want them to behave differently. And I want the police to be 10 different things instead of just this one big behemoth that you call and hope that the person who's responding has had enough experience in their career to know that maybe this is just somebody in need of help, or somebody who's having an issue with drugs, for example, and not somebody who needs to be tased or shot. Also, when we talk about recidivism, we have to talk about the geographic impact that somebody who gets sent back to a place, a town where they don't see themselves reflected in their leadership, where they don't see themselves reflected in their policing, where they don't see themselves reflected in their social services, has a lot less opportunities than a person who goes back to a community where they are fully embraced by a community that has resources. That person's less likely to be a recidivist, not because that person's less inclined to criminology, because they had less opportunity and less need for it. This is a conversation that I want us to continue to keep having and always have, because we just are funding our police services in this state and in this country wrongly. We are going to look back in 30 years and think, how on earth that we suffer through criminology like this for so long, having one organization have to treat and respond to all of the various things that we need from a police force in the United States.
Yeah, so great. Thank you both so much for those answers. We'll do one more question from the audience. And that question is, what would you consider to be the most important factors when deciding whether or not to grant parole or a pardon? How much consideration should be given to statements of a victim or the victim's family? And when should an incarcerated person be given the benefit of the doubt? And I think we'll start with Rep. Sims there.
Yeah, this is, I don't know if there's cynicism in this question. I don't want to imply cynicism in this question, but this is a mathematical process and it shouldn't be. I think one of the problems as someone who's done civil rights law is pretending that there is somehow supposed to be a mathematical approach to criminology or a mathematical approach to something as important as a pardon. You know, are victims advocates and victims representatives and victims themselves in a critical role in the pardon process? Absolutely, of course they are. Is it important to find out if a DA only prosecutes people of color? Yeah, that's really important to find out. Is it really important to find out if a particular DA and a particular judge have had a long-standing relationship? Is that important to find out? It is. Is it important to find out that when certain crimes are prosecuted by certain DAs, they are either always prosecuted more harshly? Those things are all important, but none of this is mathematical. It's part of the reason that this process is so important. It's part of the reason that this process requires, as we've all agreed, additional resources and more eyes, is because it's not math. It's not 35% of victims' intent minus 25% of whether or not we believe that the person, is intending to commit a crime or not. This requires, it's a case-by-case process. It's why it requires so many more resources, and it's why it requires so much empathy. It requires empathy. Empathy dictates in these types of situations the ways that we give to things, as it does for every decision that every human being makes. And removing the empathy and inserting some type of a statistical analysis, I don't think is the right approach. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but I think that there's not a mathematical answer that I think satisfies the question you're asking.
Jenna, go ahead.
Ray, did you want me to repeat the question?
Repeat the question, but I think I have the answer to it. Please go ahead.
Okay, so let me find it again. All right. So the question was, what would you consider the most important factors when deciding whether or not to grant parole or a pardon? How much consideration should be given to statements of the victim? And when should an incarcerated person be given the benefit of the doubt?
Well, so what I've always seen as best practices and what my family has based their advocacy on when it comes to prisoners at a state, level, a federal level, what have you, depending on the case, it's a case-by-case basis. We like to concentrate on prisoners that have meritorious proposals, meritorious commutations with institutional recommendation. That means that the people that know them recommend that they have a second chance. So it's on a case-by-case basis. It's not on a bulk, case. So you can't have a whole bunch of cases at once. And I do think that before they get released into society, a society that they might not know, they might not recognize anymore, we need to make sure that pre-release they have education and they have mental health, so they can transition effectively, and that involves their families as well, and they need to make a living once they come out. So when it comes to what guidelines do we use to make sure that people are that they have effective commutations, it's on a case by case. It's on institutional recommendations, and we have to see also. And I agree with Representative Sims on this. Whether it was the prison sentence was motivated by racial disparity, which affects so many of us, being Puerto Rican, being black and brown, the system is really not, it's lopsided, and we have to resolve that. But when it comes to my commutation guidelines as the Lieutenant Governor, it's all on a case-by-case, and it's all with institutional recommendation that we get to revise those cases.
Thank you, both of you. We're going to try to close out. I just want to say that there was some serious technical difficulties that prevented Representative Austin Davis from participating today. We wanted to clarify that issue. It's unfortunate, but I want to thank Representative Sims and Mr. Sosa for finding a way to make this work, being ready, respecting us, respecting the progressive voice. So let's just close this out. You've kind of mentioned it, but let's clear it up. Why should progressives vote for you? Just a minute and a half, and then we can just close out and thank, because we're over time. But you know what? I'm glad that we went into this, because there's still substance that needs to be discussed, and people need to have the opportunity to assess your distinguishable differences. Okay? So, Ray Sosa, in a minute and a half, why should progressives vote for you? And the same, Representative Sims.
So because experience matters, folks. You cannot, my only experience since 1995 mirrors what the Lieutenant Governor position does. I'm an expert in emergency management. I'm an expert in the executive branch of government. I'm not hopping branches. I would love to be a judge, but I can't. So that being said, we keep electing people that do not have the experience, that use the position as something higher. And then the position, the narrative becomes that is unimportant. And that's not true. I'm the only one that can be a partner for any governor when it comes to criminal justice, when it comes to emergency, and when it comes to coordination of agencies. I've worked for 3 governors that have appointed me, and I have worked in task forces with 3 governors in Pennsylvania. And I will be the most effective candidate because I've done the position before. I wouldn't have to rely on advice from anybody else. So that being said, thank you so much. Thank you for the honor. Thank you, Representative Smith, Representative Sims. And it's always a pleasure to share my platform with everybody.
Representative Sims.
Yeah, I mean, Carmina and Jenna, thank you both for working with us as well to make this happen. This has been a really well done forum. I'm really grateful for the questions. I'm grateful for the participation. So thank you both. I agree that experience matters, and the simple truth of the matter is that I am the single most experienced person running for this seat with respect to our state government and the actual role of the Lieutenant Governor. More importantly, as all of your viewers know, progressive isn't a title, it's a track record. I rank among one of the single most progressive legislators in Pennsylvania state legislative history. For the bulk of my 10 years, I was not only one of the very few progressives, but I now am joined by just a handful of actual progressives in our legislature. It's become a hot button that Democrats like to say they are progressives around elections. But those of us that have been fighting for women's rights, reproductive rights, racial and ethnic justice, LGBTQ civil rights, criminal justice reform, fighting for the environment, and fighting for immigrants know what real progressives are and what real progressives do. I have been the tip of the spear and the face of the shield in Pennsylvania politics for progressive politics for the better part of a decade. And what we have coming up in these next 4 years is a greater need than ever before for experience and discipline in our Lieutenant Governor. I'm the most experienced person running with the rules, and I'm the most experienced person running with respect to Pennsylvania government. It's the single thing that we need right now more than ever. Every single Republican is coming for our rights. Every single one of us on this Zoom right now will have our direct rights impacted by a loss in November. My life's work is fighting for equality. As Barney Frank said, if you don't have a seat at the table, you are probably on the menu. My life's work is taking those of us on the menu and putting us at the table, and doing that as the next progressive Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania is the single most important thing I can think to do with this skill set that I've developed working with all of you these last almost 20 years.
Jenna, any last thoughts you'd like to say?
No, this has been great. I'm glad we were able to get past some of the technical difficulties. This has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. And yeah, I am looking forward to learning more about both of you and I think no matter who we end up with in this position, we're going to have a great candidate for lieutenant governor.
Brian, could you get back on really quickly? Okay. I at the end of the conversation that we had with with Josh Shapiro, I asked him if he would commit once the primaries were over to go on tour and have a conversation series with women of color across the state. I just think we are the women that you need to be working with. Whatever shade besides white, but white women too. But women of color are going to be essential in the race in terms of getting us out. So I just want to ask either one of you, if you become the general candidate and Mr. Shapiro has already affirmed that he would participate, would you join in the effort to go with the Democratic candidate for governor on a tour for women of color, a conversation series? And I'm talking about outside Pittsburgh and outside of Philadelphia.
Carmina, I'm the only candidate for this race that is campaigning statewide in all 67 counties. There are 65 counties in this state that are not Pittsburgh, that are not Philadelphia, they're not Allegheny County, and they want these conversations. People tend to think that only these two cities somehow want these conversations. I know a bunch of women in Monroe County that would sure want to join us.
So is that a yes, Representative Sim?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sosa?
My demographic is black and brown. So I've already been in 67 counties. I know where my pockets of needs are. I don't have to relate. I know how we get discriminated and what we need at this point because I'm Puerto Rican. So
Mira, is that a yes or no?
That is a hell yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Jenna. Is it okay if I just say thank you to everyone? And I think this was great, and I'm glad that you agreed. I wish you both the best. We do too from here from Keystone Progress. And let's do the work after the general election. I mean, I'm looking at both of you. If you don't win, are you going to still help us maintain Democratic leadership moving forward after the general election? For the record.
Yes.
You are all professionals. Excellent. Thank you. It's going to take all of us, everyone. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for this time. And thank you for your time, Brian and Ray.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye all.
Jenna, don't kill me. Oh.
What happened?
Nothing. Just stay on for a second as everybody gets off. Or do you have another session?
Not yet. No, here, hold on. I gotta go grab my phone charger though. I'll be right back.
All right.
Good evening, Carmina. My name is Rita Miles. I'm calling you in regards to the ceremony that's be taking place.
Y'all, I'm just gonna say it. Meditech is better than Epic. I'll tell you what.
You know what? Maybe we should call each other. Oh, wait. Anizer's trying to come in. Hold on.
Yeah, I was gonna say because there's
Yeah,
so
that's what I was about
I
to say.
know.
It's call each other and talk offline.
Yes, we are.
Okay, yeah, that's all I was gonna say.
I got you.
I was trying to text you.
Oh, listen,
You guys
think
did great, though. I just want to let you know that I came in in the middle of it, I guess, and it was a great conversation. And there's no need to feel like you flubbed anything, but it was really a good session. So thank you guys for doing it.
Yeah. It was just a technical difficult. I mean, technical difficulties are technical difficulties. There's not much we can do but deal with them, you know.
I missed all of that.
It's like the only problem has been technical stuff, you know. We just have to deal with it. It's just we don't have a choice.
It's the world we live in today. It's
Yeah.
the world we live in today. But so far, I believe that the summit is going very well from what I can see and jump into different sessions. I just can't say more positive things about it. So I'll see you guys in the next session. You two doing a session together again?
No, honey, I'm done. I'm done with my sessions. Amen. I think I did about 6.
Yeah. I was gonna say you've been in all of them.
But notice I dressed up for you, Jenna. I had my afternoon look.
I have one more.
What time is yours?
4:30.
Okay, good. No, I'm exited out. All these people are calling me like, what the hell? What are you doing? I'm like, I'm on a virtual summit. But Jen, I'm gonna call you real quick.
Okay.
All right.
Hey, it's good to see you.
Bye, everybody.
Yes, you too. Bye-bye.